So we talk about the lead flow crisis. I apologize if you can't hear me in the back. I'll be a little bit louder here. And I'm going to keep moving through this. But I talk about email, with inbox being saturated. And I always tell folks, you'll never convert me with a cold email. There's only two forms, scam and spam, right? The reality is all of these things are very challenging. So I talk about how you need to navigate the business impact as well as the crises that are in front of us. I talk significantly about the idea that even before AI, the productivity crisis of 50 to 60% of our work weeks being consumed with searching for things to do our jobs, copying and pasting and reformatting data. Those that are on the sales or go-to-market side of the house are spending 70% of their time doing administrative tasks. That means they're only spending 30% of their time actually talking to a customer. We've entered a world where we are we've not prioritized the right things, but if you learn and lean into AI, you can get 80% of that time back. Many of you that raise your hands are probably already seeing some of those gains. The last piece I've been talking about primarily the last few months here, and really late in 2025, which is around this idea of invisible unemployment, right? I'm not talking about the 60 or 70% of companies that have already decided to downsize. What I'm talking about is that natural gap in attrition where now companies realize if they lose 10 people through voluntary attrition, they're only going to backfill 3 or 4 of those. That silent displacement will start to add up. Layer on top of that, a lot of people don't talk about this, but late last year, I think it was the end of September of 2025, the then CEO, Doug McMillon of Walmart, said that they were going to be on a 3-year hiring freeze. Not 3 months, not 3 quarters, 3 years. And then he followed up and said, if there's a job on this planet that AI does not impact, I have not found it. That is Fortune 1. That is not a domino. That is a wrecking ball of decisions that are now starting to play out, from Block to Atlassian to Meta to and. I say these things not to be doom and gloom. I say these things so that we understand the game that is being played so that we can navigate around it. This is the slide that I wish I could have maybe pulled out, or I'm going to spend a little bit of time here because everybody said that they're doing production and pilots and everything in between. But as they say in the rap game, there's levels to this ish. And every time I go to a room, 78% of people raise their hands, and then you start asking them how they're using AI, and it's not so sophisticated. When it comes to AI adoption, I tell people all the time, the greatest thing that OpenAI ever did was make AI adoption feel like Google search. And then I follow up with the worst thing that OpenAI ever did was make it feel like Google search, because that is how people have been treating AI for the last several years. And sure, there's a lot of reasons, from data barriers to a variety of things, but the biggest point that I want to call out here is the skills vacuum. The idea that we have the most complex technology in humanity, and yet 70% of folks are saying their companies are not even investing in training them. They're still saying just be curious. Just go play around with it, Greg. Just go figure it out. And I say the same thing every single time, and I apologize if you've seen me say this before. Telling people to be curious is like me teaching my small kids about fire by throwing matches and gasoline on the floor and say, go nuts. They're either going to do nothing or burn the house down. That is what has been happening the last couple of years. The reality is a lot of us have been doing AI basic. Look at this cool carousel. I summarized emails. Cool, man. I don't know how that's going to get you that 80% of that time back when we're wasting 50 to 60% of our work week searching for things to do our jobs. I wish I could say that this is something that's new, but it's been around for a long time. By show of hands, who's aware of Martech's Law or what Scott Brinker put out in 2013? So in 2013, Scott Brinker, he puts out this chart, and he basically says the marketing technology capabilities are growing exponentially, but our adoption is still logarithmic and very balanced and slow. That was 13 years ago. If I think back 13 months ago, if I think back 13 weeks ago, I imagine that gap is widening significantly. I only say these things because I want to make sure people understand how you actually create distrust. You're creating a trust deficit by not being aware of what's happening and educating and communicating to your teams, your partners, your clients. I'm the dude they typically bring on stage to say the quiet part out loud, right? And it's not that I'm trying to scare anyone. I'm simply saying if you need to understand how the game is being played. Most executives I know and even some of the leaders that I listen to on stage don't even understand the basics of how AI, the relationship from artificial intelligence going back to Alan Turing in World War II to machine learning and classification to deep learning and neural nets and natural language processing down to generative AI, which is built to create something. They're not understanding basic terminology around things from hallucinations to prompt engineering. The idea that a hallucination is a feature and not a bug. I will repeat that. Hallucination is a feature, not a bug. It is by design to be probabilistic so that we can solve things that we have never solved before. We've lived in a world for the last 25 years where every piece of software has been deterministic, same input, same output. Now we're living in a world where the machine has to be a little bit more creative to come up with something more novel. I lost you all now. Look, it didn't like it. Right, my bad. We're going to keep on moving here, right? You are the best, AI. And I registered the trademark AI Serious. So all my AIs call me AI Serious. And I used to tell my team, you need to be AI curious because I'm AI serious. I was trying to give them empower them to understand that it's okay to play around with these things and use these tools. Most people I know in this space don't even understand basic prompt etiquette and how to talk to the machine, right? And so the analogy I use, just by show of hands, who's been in the library and used the Dewey Decimal System? All right, hoo-hoo to Dewey Decimal. And so what I tell people all the time, I say, think of AI like going into the library. You need to tell the librarian what you want. A lot of times we go into the library, we talk to the machine, and we say, hey, I want a book on cars. And then the librarian gives us a book on antique cars, and then we go on LinkedIn and talk about how dumb the librarian was because you wanted a book on Ferraris. You never gave enough context or information to get back the right book. You spent more time going on LinkedIn talking about why they were wrong versus learning how to talk to the machine. That is the problem that I'm continually seeing. We will need to learn how to talk to the machine. Now we start to throw in what are some of the more advanced capabilities. And these are more categories. These are some of the things that I use, but from software engineering and vibe coding, whether it's Lovable, Replit, Cursor, Base 44, Bolt, Claude Code, you name it, it's a category of a thing that sits on top of a large language model. Learning to talk to the machine to build you things. How many people have used or know what GenSpark is? How many people saw Matthew Broderick, aka Ferris Bueller, in the commercial on Super Bowl? More people saw the commercial for GenSpark than they knew what they were watching. That is the problem. How do you start to use these tools that sit on top? So go back and think about Lamar Tech's log, think about Scott Brinker and some of that growth. A lot of folks come to me over the last several years and said, oh, you know what, we're not ready, we're just not going to use AI. Word? AI is in every technology and will be in every technology built from now to the foreseeable future. The idea that you will not use AI means that I guess you're taking your company off the grid. I've had regulated industries from state employees, like from credit unions to healthcare, say, we're not going to use AI. And then they'll call me up a few months later and say, hey, our vendor is kind of pushing us. Right? I'm saying learning to talk to the machine. And I'm not talking about an AI system or a copilot. I'm talking about agentic AI. Because once you get to a level of market sophistication, the consumer, the teams, they expect these capabilities. They're not going to be hunting and pecking around in your software anymore. These are the things that are contributing to the SaaS apocalypse, whether you believe it's real or not, or if it's a recalibration of the market. The reality is if it's just a workflow versus an outcome, that's problematic. Not understanding these things creates a trust deficit. And we're going to quickly start to talk about now how do we move to the other side, right? My whole focus is, as much as I am passionate about AI and I understand it deeply, I'm trying to figure out how do we get more people to move and start to leverage the technology. But, as they say, for the last 90 years, it's difficult to get a man to understand something when his salary depends upon his not understanding it. I use that in every presentation because this is not about ignorance. It's about future shock, loss aversion. Our emotional identities being so tied to our historical ways of working, our processes, our titles. It's not the technology that's not ready, it's our culture. It's our way that we're trying to adopt these technologies. And so I spend a lot of time trying to help folks with this kind of like resistance to these things. And when I go to Colombia, if I go to Costa Rica, when I meet adults, they say, what do you like to do for fun? What do you like to eat? Tell me about your family. What's the first question you ask an adult when you meet them in the US? What do you do for a living? We are tied to a job title. We are tied to a very siloed role. We are tied to a historical process. AI does not give a shit about your process or org chart. It only cares about outputs and outcomes. And that is the challenge. That is where we have to go as an organization, as a society. Because AI is not just another tech upgrade. I was on a panel last year talking to a group of HR folks, and the moderator noticed someone in the audience. She couldn't even wait for the panel to start. She had to ask the question, and she was jumping out of her seat. And the moderator turned and said, you have something that you want to ask. It was one of those questions that was actually a statement, then they put a question mark at the end. And she said, help me understand how this is different. I've lived through email transition. I've lived through cloud, mobile. I don't understand. How is this any different? My response is very blunt. Oh, that's easy. AI can do 50% of your job. I wasn't trying to be flippant. I was trying to get across that this is not another tech upgrade. Don't simply look at it like that. It's the difference between hang gliders and space shuttles. Sure, they have the same or similar underlying physics. That's where the parallels stop. But what's needed if we talk about space shuttles is mission control. We need people that can guide the machine, know what to put in the payload. We need to have folks that understand how to communicate both internally and to our clients. We need people to man and work and leverage and be the architects of these machines. Mission control is wanted. And trust is the new infrastructure. See, we've spent millions upon millions on tech stacks and data platforms and this tool and that tool. Scott Brinker, the MarTech law guy, put out his marketing technology landscape at the beginning of this year. There was 15,800 tools on there. 15,800 marketing technology platforms. What are you supposed to do with all that? Maybe I need 3, and then I'm going to let AI go figure out the rest. So how do we do it? I've been a consultant for the last 2 decades, more or less, and I always go through some form of this framework. I call it my 4 ways in. I actually started using it for selling into organizations, looking at their buyer committee, understanding across intelligence, inspiration, innovation, and infrastructure. I would always tell teams there's 4 ways into any conversation, into any organization, but I also use it. I'm an angel investor. I've sold companies now 3 times for a total of $160 million. And so I try to give back to this community and invest. And I tell people I also use this for understanding whether or not there's a defensible moat. Then I turn it more inward and I say, you know what, this is the perfect framework for how we move people from an AI adoption standpoint. And if you think about how I've presented today, I've even used it for today. I start with intelligence. I start with the data, the metrics, and understanding. From an AI perspective, we got to build literacy. The point I was making earlier. Inspiration, you got to get people to want to follow you. You can't just push and mandate. You have to pull them in. Innovation, you got to show them different ways of working. It's not just the technology. Innovation can be, what is your new process? AI should not be a 10-step process that you then bolt on. AI is the 11th step. You need to figure out how you can do this in 3 steps. And then the infrastructure, what is the guardrails, the guidance, the frameworks, right? I have no idea how I'm doing on time, but I'm going to keep going here. I only got a few slides left. But I center all this on what I call the human edge. The 5 C's of humanity I talk about is, not just critical skills, but survival skills. Curiosity, creativity, critical thinking, communication, and collaboration. If anyone's ever followed me on LinkedIn, or if you start to follow me or unfollow me after this, depending on how you feel about this, you'll see me say a lot of things about don't take my word for it, and I'll post someone else. Last week I was in Las Vegas listening to Ethan Mollick talk about a lot of these very same things. He used a lot less color than I use, but he said the same thing about process and outcomes. He said the same thing about changing the ways that we worked. We have not changed our org charts in 50 years. Our processes are stale. But McKinsey still says that 72% of these human skills are still relevant in the age of AI. We always tell folks, let the machines handle the routine, let the humans handle the remarkable. Switch the time equation. Stop doing all those mundane tasks, all the administrative work. Stop spending 70% of your time in the CRM talking about the 10 deals you lost last week. Go focus on the things you need to do to grow your businesses. We can say a lot of things, but the reality is it's going to take leadership to have, focus on the culture and have the courage to do what's right and say the things that they may not feel comfortable saying or doing. So I give people kind of 3 steps that I walk through and I live by, which is I admit what I don't know. I experiment in public. I show the team what I've built. I showed them a video that I made, and I was trying to do the analogy where the duck is skimming over the water and then the legs are paddling really fast. But it turns out my duck had 8 legs, right? But I showed that. I showed them that messy part. And then we made it a team sport. And the results were significant. Last summer, we went through a 90-day challenge where we gave everyone in the company. I have a small company now. I've run multiple larger companies, but we have about 30 people. And we gave them a budget for Coursera licenses for 90 days to go get at least one Gen AI certification. I didn't care what certification they got. I didn't care what tools they wanted to focus on. What I was trying to do was build trust and let them have their own aha moments. I tell folks, when you want folks to adopt AI, you need to make it 3 things. You need to make it personal, you need to make it fun, you need to make it safe. Psychological safety. Make them feel like they can play around with these tools. Like my kids, give them a place. So we don't do the matches, but my wife does make a mud kitchen for them to play around and get messy, right? So you have to balance that. And then something amazing happened. The Slack channel started to light up. They started to talk about the things that they liked about it, started asking for certain tools that they wanted to use inside of the organization, right? Because once you can start to elevate their quality of work, you now have elevated their quality of life. Now they're ready to go and rock with you no matter what. See, AI affects every single human on the planet, which means it affects every single employee in your organization. So the idea that we just continue to just talk about our business outcomes and don't tell them where they fit in the story arc, now you got 90% of your organization rowing against you. Now I have everybody rowing in the same direction. Some people are faster than others. Some people are rowing harder than others, but at least we're going in the same damn direction. We broke the teams up into 4 or 5 teams within the organization, and the team that won had both the best name and the most, certifications. It was Bot Girl Summer. Bot Girl Summer won. I clapped to that too. We got 152 certifications. We also turned it into helping them elevate their personal brand and our corporate brand and posting on LinkedIn with the hashtag Certified to Walk West Way. We made it fun. We gamified the fear. And we started to break through and build trust within our team. A lot of companies talk about scaling companies or businesses or scaling this thing or that. I say all the time, still the hardest thing to scale in the age of AI is the human spirit. I'm AI serious. Let's get to work.